The empath, by nature, moves through life with a heightened sensitivity, a capacity to feel into the wounds of others, to carry burdens that are not their own, and to seek, often unconsciously, the redemption of suffering that they themselves have known. They are, in this sense, the inheritors of the archetype of the wounded healer, whose compassion is both their blessing and their cross. The narcissist, by contrast, wears the mask of grandiosity, a fragile construct designed to conceal a profound hollowness, a wound so deep that the only recourse is to construct a palace of mirrors and illusions in which they themselves are both king and captive. But what is it that draws these two souls together? Is it mere misfortune, a tragic accident of fate? Or is there, beneath the apparent randomness, a deeper choreography, a dance of archetypes playing out on the stage of the unconscious? In my years of study and analysis, I have seen countless variations of this drama, the sensitive, open-hearted one who finds themselves inexorably drawn to the one who cannot love except as an extension of their own ego. The empath, yearning for intimacy and healing, gravitates toward the narcissist, whose hunger for adoration and validation is insatiable. The result is not a partnership, but a collision, a sacred wound reenacted, a mythological encounter whose purpose, though obscured by suffering, is nothing less than the awakening of the soul. In the beginning, the empath does not see the narcissist as they truly are. Instead, they behold a projection, a figure who seems at first so luminous, so full of potential and depth, that the empath's heart is compelled to surrender. This is not naivety, but the operation of the archetypal imagination the empath perceives in the narcissist, a reflection of their own longing for wholeness. They mistake charisma for substance, intensity for intimacy, promises for presence in the realm of dreams. It is as if the empath sees a beautiful palace, one that beckons with the promise of safety and belonging, only to find, once inside, that the rooms are empty, the mirrors cracked, and the walls echo with the chill of absence. Yet it is not the narcissist alone who is to blame for this illusion. The unconscious collusion between the two is a secret covenant, a script written by the hidden hands of their mutual wounds. The empath, often shaped by early experiences of conditional love or emotional neglect, is driven by an ancient hope that if they can love enough, heal enough, or understand enough, they might finally receive the recognition and acceptance that their soul has craved since childhood. The narcissist, whose inner emptiness is unbearable, seeks a partner who will mirror their grandiosity, provide endless admiration, and absorb their pain. Each is the answer to the other's secret question. Yet neither can deliver the redemption the other unconsciously seeks. And so the cycle begins, a spiral of hope and disappointment, idealization and devaluation, closeness and abandonment. The empath gives and gives, seeking to fill the bottomless well of the narcissist's need, only to find themselves depleted, confused, and alone. The narcissist, threatened by true intimacy, recoils, withdraws, or lashes out, ensuring that the empath's love can never truly reach them. This is not merely a psychological pattern, but a symbolic enactment of the ancient drama between Eros and Thanatos, love and death, union and separation, light and shadow. The empath becomes ensnared in the labyrinth of the narcissist's psyche, wandering endlessly in search of the Minotaur, the hidden core of suffering that, if faced, might finally set them free.
They say the soul begins to awaken when the familiar world no longer feels like home, when every smile becomes a mask, when every word of kindness hides a calculation, when every embrace feels like a trap designed not to give, but to take. It is here, in the silent fracture between what appears and what is, that the empath begins to tremble, surrounded by those who feed not on truth, but on control. The empath feels the slow erosion of their own center, and yet this erosion is also a doorway. Carl Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And so the empath, caught in the orbit of the narcissist, is pushed toward this dark initiation, one they did not choose, but one that life has chosen for them. At first, the empath bends. Their nature is to give, to feel, to stretch themselves into the unspoken needs of others. They sense wounds beneath cruelty, loneliness beneath arrogance, hunger beneath manipulation. They whisper to themselves, "If I can just love them enough, perhaps they will soften, perhaps they will heal." But the narcissist does not soften. Instead, they take and they take again, and with each taking, the empath feels their own outline blur. The empath begins to lose the boundary between where they end and the other begins. They start carrying sorrows that are not theirs, moods that are not theirs, rage that is not theirs. This is projection in its most intimate form. The narcissist projects their disowned shadows, their insecurity, their shame, their emptiness, and the empath, open and porous, absorbs them as if they were their own. The empath becomes both the scapegoat and the sanctuary, the vessel that holds what the narcissist refuses to see. But deep within, a tension grows. Something ancient in the soul resists. The empath feels a restlessness, a quiet rebellion. Their dreams begin to change. Perhaps they dream of being chased, or trapped in a room with no doors, or swimming in dark waters where they cannot find the shore. The unconscious speaks in symbols, pressing them to see what waking life refuses to show, that they are imprisoned in a drama not of their own making. And yet, the empath hesitates, for to walk away feels like betrayal. To stop giving feels like violence. They believe their love is the medicine. They believe endurance is nobility. But here lies the trap in serving the hunger of the narcissist. They betray themselves. They abandon their own soul at the altar of another's void. This is the first wound, the fracture of identity. The empath confuses selflessness with self-erasure, compassion with compliance, empathy with enmeshment. They mistake surrender for love, forgetting that true love requires two whole beings, not one devoured and the other enthroned. And so their suffering deepens. Yet suffering, in Jung's vision, is never wasted. It is the crucible through which the self whispers, demanding attention. The very despair the empath feels is the seed of awakening. For only when the burden becomes unbearable does the hidden strength begin to stir. Only when the empath sees that they cannot save the narcissist do they begin to turn the gaze inward to the shadow they themselves have ignored. The shadow of the empath is not cruelty, not arrogance, not domination. No, their shadow is their silence, their inability to say no, their fear of being disliked, their terror of being seen as selfish. The shadow of the empath is the buried rage at being used, the grief of a self abandoned, the hunger for reciprocity long denied. It is this shadow they must face. Imagine it, the empath standing before an inner mirror, trembling as they see not just the pain inflicted by the narcissist, but their own complicity in the dance, the ways they gave away their power, the ways they muted their voice, the ways they mistook martyrdom for meaning. This recognition burns, but in the burning, something purifies. The empath begins to feel the faint pulse of their own center, a spark, a reminder that they are not merely a vessel for others' wounds, but a soul with its own shape, its own gravity. And in that spark lies the first taste of freedom. Yet freedom is not a sudden flight. It comes in whispers, in subtle awakenings. It comes when the empath notices, in a moment of clarity, the hollowness of the narcissist's praise. It comes when they feel the falseness of the game and no longer wish to play. It comes when they hear the sound of their own inner voice, however fragile, calling them back. This is the beginning of individuation, the path toward becoming who they truly are. Beyond persona, beyond projection. Jung spoke of the persona as the mask we wear to meet the world. The narcissist's mask is dazzling, carefully constructed, demanding admiration. The empath's mask is softer, selfless, endlessly giving. Both are masks. Both conceal the deeper self. To awaken, the empath must peel away their own mask. They must learn that compassion without boundaries is not love, but self-destruction. They must learn that saying no can be as sacred as saying yes. They must learn that their worth is not measured by how much they endure, but by how deeply they honor their own soul. And when they begin to learn, the world shifts. The narcissist senses the change. The supply is no longer endless. The mirror they once used to see themselves begins to crack. They will resist. They will rage. They will accuse. But the empath, though trembling, begins to stand. They begin to speak in a new voice, one that does not beg to be heard, but simply declares, "I am here. I exist. I matter." This declaration is not an act of war, but an act of birth. The birth of the true self, no longer hidden in shadows, no longer sacrificed at the feet of another's hunger. It is a birth that hurts. For every birth requires labor. Every birth requires leaving behind what can no longer sustain life. The empath, once imprisoned, now feels the first taste of inner space. They breathe, they see. They begin to sense that their journey is not about fixing the narcissist, but about reclaiming the fragments of themselves scattered in the struggle. This reclamation is not instant, but each breath, each boundary, each act of self-honoring becomes a step toward wholeness. And in that wholeness lies not only healing, but a deeper compassion, a compassion no longer chained to servitude, but rooted in strength. A compassion that sees the narcissist not as an enemy, but as a mirror of what happens when the shadow devours the self. And in that seeing, the empath is no longer naive. They are awake. This is where the journey begins, not ends. For every step into awareness invites a deeper descent into shadow, and every descent carries the seed of ascent. The path of the empath is not to escape suffering, but to let suffering transform them into someone more whole, more conscious, more alive. The empath has tasted the first spark of freedom, but the journey inward is far from over. What follows is not a simple release, but a long passage through shadowed valleys, where old illusions cling and deeper truths wait to be uncovered. The breaking of one chain only reveals the others that were hidden beneath it. And so the empath, trembling but determined, begins to walk further into the labyrinth of the psyche, guided not by the light of certainty, but by the quiet pulse of something authentic awakening within. In these early steps, The pull of the narcissist still lingers. Their voice echoes in memory. Their demands echo in the body. Their distortions echo in the mind. The empath feels the phantom weight of obligations that no longer exist. At night, the dreams persist, whispering of entanglement, showing endless mirrors and faces that shift and fracture. It is tempting to turn back, to fall once more into the familiar, to soothe the terror of uncertainty with the numbness of repetition. But something stronger holds them now. A recognition that to turn back is to die inwardly, to calcify in a role that was never theirs to carry.
There is no controlling a raging river. You must learn to navigate it without drowning. The path of a raven is a solitary one. You end up alone, unable to trust others, only seeing the darkness within them. Is that supposed to scare me?
Do you know how many women sit in silence behind locked doors, surrounded not by emptiness, but by the echo of their own becoming? She wakes up alone, not lonely, but alone. There is a difference. The world often forgets this. Alone is not abandonment. It is confrontation. Alone is not lack. It is liberation. Most people fear solitude because in the silence, their inner voices grow louder. But she has learned to listen. She has learned to stay. In a world that once defined her worth by how many footsteps followed her into the kitchen, or how quickly she responded to a man's message, she now walks barefoot across cold floors with a sacred kind of defiance. Each step is an act of reclamation. She boils her own water. She fixes the leaky tap herself. She chooses when to rest and when to rise. And no one decides her rhythm but the moon that spills silver across her floorboards at midnight. To the outside world, she is strange, unreachable. Men say she's intimidating. Other women whisper that she's probably difficult or damaged. But what they fail to understand is that she has walked through her own inner hell, with no hand to hold but her own. This woman did not choose solitude because it was easy. She chose it because it was necessary. Jung would say she is dancing with her shadow. She has faced the disowned parts of herself, the rage, the grief, the ache of abandonment, hand invited them to tea. She did not exile the wounds. She gave them names. She listened, and in listening, she became whole. But her silence isn't rejection, it's wisdom. She's learned to hear what isn't said, to feel what's beneath words, and to choose her energy like sacred currency. This kind of woman, the one who lives alone by choice, often carries ancestral pain in her bones. Her grandmother may have been a prisoner of silence. Her mother may have whispered dreams into pillowcases while waiting for someone who never came home. But she is the rebellion in the bloodline, the one who said, "This ends with me." She wears no armor, only awareness, and yet there is a shield in her gaze, not the kind built of steel, but of boundaries, of discernment. She no longer confuses validation for connection. She doesn't need anyone to tell her she's enough, because enough is not something you find in another's eyes. It's something you reclaim from your own reflection after you've spent enough time alone with your demons to stop being afraid of them. Her apartment isn't quiet, it hums with the frequency of becoming. Books line her walls like loyal companions. Her kitchen smells like thyme and intention. She lights candles not for ambience, but for ceremony. To the untrained eye, she might seem hard, unapproachable. But she is not hard, she is structured, like the bones of a cathedral. The shocking truth is this: women who live alone are often the most emotionally rich, the most psychologically evolved, because solitude is not a punishment, it's a crucible. In it, the false self burns. The people-pleasing, the shrinking, the masks gone, what remains is essence. And she guards that essence like a lioness, not because she doesn't want love, but because she knows what love is not. It is not begging, it is not shrinking, it is not explaining her soul in bullet points to someone who only scans headlines. She would rather eat alone than sit at a table where her presence must be diluted. The modern world sells romance like candy, but she knows real intimacy begins with self-confrontation. She has stared at her reflection through tear-stained mirrors and asked, "Why did you betray yourself for their comfort?" And then she vowed to never do it again. Her solitude is not a void, it's a forge, and what emerges from it is a woman who no longer performs. She simply is. She doesn't keep the television on for background noise. She has grown comfortable with the sound of her own breath, the rhythm of her thoughts swirling like smoke inside candlelit evenings. There is no need to fill the silence because in That silence, she has met herself again and again, and every time, she has chosen to stay. For a woman to live alone is not just a physical state, it is a psychological rite of passage. It is a severing from the external identity shaped by patriarchal expectations and childhood echoes. Jung spoke of the anima, the feminine within. But this woman is not merely exploring her inner archetype, she is becoming it. She is no longer the daughter waiting to be protected, the girl hoping to be chosen. She is the queen in her own inner castle, and solitude is her throne. But be warned, her solitude is not passive. It is not numb retreat, it is fierce discernment. She does not invite energy that dilutes her power.
I miss them. Try waking up with no urge to hustle, to chase, or to prove anything. And then intrusive thoughts sink in, and you mistake that stillness for failure. The truth, that apathy, that emptiness, that is not regression. That is detox. You're not broken. You are clearing space. Your nervous system is recalibrating. Your spirit is unlearning survival mode. You're not lazy. You're not behind. You're healing so deeply that it is invisible. The glow up comes after the void, not before it. Your transformation will not be pretty. It will be silent, brutal, sacred, and it will save you. Want to know the lesson that I missed more often than not? After you heal, after you align, after you start magnetizing better things, you're going to be tested with good, not bad, good. That job that sounds perfect on paper, the relationship that checks all the boxes, that opportunity that anyone else would kill for. But your body says no. Not because it's bad, but because it doesn't match you. When you've done the work, you stop chasing shiny things that disrupt your nervous system. You stop settling for potential. You stop saying yes to what only looks aligned externally. Because now, peace is your baseline. And if it costs you your clarity, your stability, your energy, it's too expensive. Discernment at this level is subtle. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's just you knowing your frequency so well that you don't need a reason to walk away. Your no is holy now, even to the things that look perfect. That's mastery. Wednesday? I come in peace.
That's a shame. I brought my pocket maze. The medieval kind.
Because when a woman chooses to be alone, she isn't getting lost, she's finding herself. And that kind of self-discovery doesn't come with applause, likes, or company. It comes with silence, strength, and a kind of freedom most people still don't understand. No, she's not lonely, she's selective, she's not cold, she just got tired of burning for people who never wanted to feel the warmth. There's something profoundly threatening about a woman who doesn't need a relationship to feel whole. Because that shatters the logic of control, dismantles the myth of emotional dependency, and reveals a brutal truth. Most men don't know what to do with a woman who doesn't need saving. And most women are still learning to recognize themselves in that silent, yet deafening mirror of power. Carl Jung once said that everything we deny in ourselves becomes part of our shadow. And many of these single women are actually a reflection of the collective shadow. They are what many dream of becoming, but few have the courage to embody. They don't scream for love. They whisper their choices. They don't put themselves on display to attract attention. They retreat to preserve themselves. They're less interested in charming princes and more in their own peace. And that makes people uncomfortable, because while the world demands urgency to be with someone, these women have discovered the power of being with themselves. The woman who lives alone without a boyfriend isn't lost. She's operating on a different level. A level where nothing is begged for, it's chosen. Where approval isn't needed, presence is enough. And maybe that's why she sparks so much criticism, so much judgment, so many attempts to label or explain her. But what many still don't understand is that behind her apparent absence is a presence that fills, that transcends, that challenges the emotional status quo. She doesn't want just any kind of love, she wants something that doesn't shrink her. And until that comes along, she stands strong, whole, complete. Maybe you don't get it right now. Maybe you think it's exaggeration, pride, or emotional damage in disguise. But deep down, way deep down, there's a question inside you, a quiet one that pulses even when you try to ignore it. What if that silent part is actually the only one that leads to the most important kind of love? The one that starts with you. The silence that surrounds a woman who lives alone is not emptiness. It's a sanctuary. And those who don't understand the value of that space often call her cold, distant, or even arrogant. But what few people see is that she didn't build that fortress to shut the world out. She built it to not lose herself. Carl Jung also said that everything we don't face in ourselves, we end up projecting onto others. And maybe that's why so many women still confuse solitude with absence, when in reality, it can be the fertile ground for self-discovery. While most people look to fill themselves through external connections, this woman turned her gaze inward. And there, in the vastness of her own unconscious, she faced the ghosts she avoided for years. Childhood wounds, unspoken abandonments, attachments disguised as love. Her decision to be alone didn't come from an open wound, but from a scar that finally healed. She didn't stop believing in love, she just stopped accepting what others called love when it only made her feel smaller. This woman knows chaos. She's loved until she lost herself. She's given too much. She's begged for crumbs that never should have been offered in the first place. But at some point, she woke up. And that awakening wasn't sudden. It was a series of disappointments that stopped hurting and started teaching. What you see now isn't coldness, it's emotional maturity. And maturity is scary because it demands presence, depth, and truth. She doesn't want just any company, she wants reciprocity. She's no longer attracted to promises, but to real presence. So maybe that's why she seems unreachable to many. Because she doesn't want to be saved, she wants to be seen. And that takes more than charm or sweet words. It takes courage to dive into the depths where few dare to go. And that's where many give up, not because she's difficult, but because she's whole. And when a woman becomes whole, she awakens two extremes in the world, admiration and fear. Admiration from those who are also seeking that wholeness, fear from those who still live in halves, waiting for someone else to make them feel complete. She doesn't want to complete anyone. She wants to overflow alongside someone who has also found themselves. Until then, she remains alone, not by fate's whim, but out of loyalty to her own soul. This woman isn't hiding, she's protecting herself. There's a vast difference between isolating and preserving oneself. But the world doesn't easily accept a woman like this, a world that still preaches happily ever after, only exists in pairs, a world that distrusts those without a partner, as if that were a sign of failure. Carl Jung once said that where convention rules, there's little room for authenticity. And this woman doesn't live by convention, she lives by essence. She hears phrases like, "You're too picky, you should be more open, nobody's perfect." And she smiles. A calm, steady, almost ironic smile, because she knows what many call picky is simply the bare minimum. The minimum it took her decades to realize she deserves. She's not looking for perfection, she's looking for someone mature enough to love without destroying. Someone who's done the inner work she has already faced. And let's be honest, that's not something you find on just any street corner. The discomfort she causes isn't in what she says, it's in what she represents. She's living proof that it's possible to be happy without depending on anyone else. And that tears masks off. Men who feed on female insecurity feel threatened. Women still trapped in the need for approval feel judged. But she isn't here to confront anyone. She's just being. And the authenticity of someone who has freed herself is by itself a brutal mirror to those still living in chains. This woman isn't in a hurry. She doesn't need to rush things to please anyone. She respects her own pace. And for that, she stirs a silent fury in a society that wants everything now. She wants depth while the world chases distractions. She wants presence while the world offers only shallow availability. She longs for soul-level bonds while everyone else is trying to look interesting on the next Instagram story. And when she says no, it's not a game, it's truth. When she walks away, it's not drama, it's self-defense. When she chooses to stay home instead of going out with someone empty, it's not arrogance, it's clarity. And that clarity, earned through pain and surrender, is her greatest revolution. Because she doesn't live to please, she lives to be. And that simple act, being, is what makes her so dangerous to the system. Perhaps what unsettles people most about this woman isn't her solitude, it's the peace she's found within herself. Carl Jung taught that those who look outward dream, but those who look inward awaken. And it was precisely that inner journey that she took. It wasn't easy. It was a grueling process of stripping off masks, facing the ghosts of emotional dependency, and rebuilding herself piece by piece. She no longer defines herself through the eyes of others. She sees herself through her own eyes. And that changes everything. How many times have you wondered if being alone is failure or freedom? How many times have you felt the need to justify yourself for not having someone by your side? This woman has felt that too. She once thought there was something wrong with her for being alone in a world that idolizes couples, even unhappy ones. But one day, she understood. It's better to be alone than to be invisible in a relationship. And that day, she made a pact with herself. Never again would she accept less than what she truly deserves. Her path is not a straight line. There are days of doubt, moments of nostalgia, nights of deep silence, but there's also a strength that grows with each decision made in awareness. She learned that true love doesn't cage, doesn't consume, doesn't manipulate. The love she wants is the kind that liberates, that adds, that supports without suffocating. And until that love arrives, she chooses to keep growing on her own, not out of pride, but out of integrity. This woman is the living embodiment of Jung's individuation. She shattered, faced her shadow, descended into the unconscious, and returned more whole than ever. And now that she recognizes herself, she refuses to be half of anything again. She doesn't want someone to complete her. She wants someone to share that awareness with. That's intimidating, because it demands emotional responsibility. And sadly, few are willing to love responsibly. Most still love out of lack, out of possession, out of fear. And if she walks alone today, it's because every step echoes with learning. Every no she gives is an act of self-respect. Every absence she imposes is a reminder that love should never be begged for. She no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. And that certainty, born from the deepest part of her soul, transforms everything around her. Because a woman who has rediscovered herself becomes dangerous, not because of her weapons, but because of her clarity. The woman who lives alone without a boyfriend is not the same woman who once begged to be loved. Something inside her broke, and it was precisely that break that set her free. Because sometimes, only in collapse does the soul find its new form. Carl Jung used to say that the tree that grows to heaven must also have roots that reach down to hell. And that's exactly what she lived through. She descended into the hell of her own story, faced ancestral fears, inherited pain, traumas that weren't just hers, but those of all the women who came before her. She broke cycles. She said no to relationships that repeated the same toxic script. She learned that it wasn't her job to heal anyone, save anyone, or accept crumbs out of fear of being alone. And when she stopped accepting less, the world tried to convince her she was wrong, but she stood her ground, first with uncertainty,
then with awareness, and finally with invulnerability. Because someone who has lived in their own abyss no longer fears absence. She learns to nourish herself with silence, to warm herself with her own presence. She's not unreachable. She simply no longer allows herself to be invaded. There's a world of difference between opening your heart and letting yourself be torn apart. She opens, yes, but only for those who come in truth. Not with rehearsed speeches or empty promises. She's seen enough to tell the difference between presence and performance. Her intuition has become sharp. Her energy is a filter. She can sense from afar what lacks depth, and she doesn't hesitate to walk away. Her transformation isn't superficial. It's archetypal. It's as if she's tapped into an ancient wisdom, an old memory that women weren't born to serve, but to express. Not to be shaped, but to overflow. And in accessing that memory, something awakened in her. A wild woman. Intuitive. Emotionally sovereign. A woman who, though alone, is far from lost. She's in communion with something greater.
Women who choose to live alone unlock a secret power, and Carl Jung knew exactly why. This will change how you see solitude forever. Society calls them lonely. Jung called them awake. Here's the hidden strength women find when they stop living for others. We're taught that a woman alone is waiting for love, but Jungian psychology reveals the shocking truth. She's often ahead of everyone else. 1. The mirror effect. No distractions means facing your true self. 2. Shadow work mastery. Solitude forces you to confront what you've been running from. 3. Authentic power. No performing femininity just to please others. 4. Psychological independence. She stops needing validation to feel whole. 5. The wise woman archetype. This is how real feminine wisdom gets born. Jung said, loneliness doesn't come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate what matters. Women who live alone, they're speaking a language most never learn.
Don't you know it's real history with outcasts? The actual story of Joseph Crackstone?
I do.
Then why be complicit in its cover-up? Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it.
But the world isn't always black and white. There are shades of grey.
Maybe for you, but it's either they write our story or we do. You can't have it both ways.
Here's what made Jung realize how powerful awakened empaths truly are. Their transformation forced everyone around them to evolve or reveal their true nature. The healthy people in their lives grew stronger from their example. The toxic people exposed themselves through desperate attempts to pull these empaths back into old patterns. Jung observed something that reflects what I call the empath's mirror effect. These transformed individuals didn't have to actively confront people's dysfunction anymore. Their mere presence reflected issues back with uncomfortable clarity. Manipulators couldn't stand to be around them. They felt exposed, seen through, unable to operate their usual psychological games. Meanwhile, authentic people felt safe with these empaths for the first time.
I didn't realize we were back on speaking terms.
Your father and I buried the hatchet. Maybe you should do the same.
I don't bury hatchets. I sharpen them.
Of how empaths naturally developed what I call warrior consciousness after severe betrayal. Jung identified consistent stages across his cases. The first stage, recognition. Empaths learn to identify their suppressed shadow aspects, not just their anger, but their intelligence, their strength, their right to boundaries. These individuals stopped pathologizing their perceptions and started trusting their emotional intelligence as the sophisticated data processing system it actually was. The second stage proved more intense, integration. Jung watched empaths merge their light and shadow aspects into what he authentically termed the complete self. They became people who could be incredibly kind to those who deserved it and ruthlessly precise with those who didn't. The third stage, application, was what Jung found most fascinating. Integrated empaths learn to use their emotional intelligence strategically, not just defensively. They became what I describe as psychological architects, people who could read, influence, and navigate human systems with supernatural precision.
Ever shot a bow and arrow before?
Only on live targets.
Jung realized these transformed empaths could no longer be victimized because they saw manipulation coming from miles away and neutralized it before it could take root. These individuals didn't just heal themselves, they became immune to psychological abuse while maintaining their capacity for genuine love and connection. Jung's private notes reveal his amazement. I have observed the development of compassion paired with wisdom. These individuals are now among the most psychologically powerful people I have ever encountered. The process's final stage was what Jung understood as the natural return to service. Integrated empaths didn't become cold or disconnected. They became selectively generous with their gifts. They used their abilities to help other empaths transform, creating what Jung documented as a network of psychologically resilient individuals. Jung's work with these empath cases created ripple effects that continue to this day. He realized that empaths weren't mentally ill. They were evolutionarily advanced individuals living in systems designed to exploit their gifts. Jung began seeing empathic sensitivity not as a disorder to be cured, but as a psychological capability to be properly understood and protected. Jung's final notes on these cases reveal something beautiful. These individuals lived the rest of their lives as what I describe as balanced warriors, people capable of incredible gentleness with those who earned it and implacable strength against those who threatened it. They became templates for what Jung believed was humanity's next evolutionary step. People who could feel everything without being destroyed by it, see everything without becoming cynical, and love deeply without losing themselves. Jung's last observation about these transformed empaths, written near the end of his career, they proved that the empath's journey is not from sensitivity to numbness, but from unconscious absorption to conscious choice. They became not less empathetic, but perfectly empathetic. Jung left one final insight for future psychologists. Never underestimate someone who has learned to trust their own perceptions completely.
And this scene proves that their familial bond goes beyond the grave.
Oral said you were dead.
I'm feeling much better now.
Like a cockroach.
Please, flattery will get you nowhere.
This is the power of strategic mystery. When people can't predict you, they can't manipulate you. When they can't read your emotions, they can't use them against you. When they don't know your limits, they hesitate to test them. But strategic mystery isn't about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming intentional about when and how you reveal information about yourself. Principle 3. Emotional firewalls. Create clear boundaries between your inner experience and your public presence. Machiavelli advised, be like a fortress. Let people see the walls, but never the layout inside. Feel whatever you need to feel privately, but externally maintain a consistent energy that others can't manipulate or exploit. Principle 4. Information asymmetry. Always know more about others than they know about you. Machiavelli spent hours studying the habits, fears, and motivations of everyone in his circle, while revealing nothing about his own. Listen more than you speak. Ask questions that reveal others' thinking, while deflecting questions about your own plans or feelings. Principle 5. Presence without pressure. Command attention through calmness, not intensity. Machiavelli noted that truly powerful people don't need to prove their power. They simply embody it through unshakable composure. But implementing these principles requires understanding the deeper psychology. Because most people reveal too much seeking connection. Therefore, they become vulnerable to those who reveal nothing while gathering intelligence. Dr. Daniel Kahneman's research on cognitive biases shows that humans consistently overestimate the importance of information that's easily available and underestimate the significance of hidden information. When you're an open book, people stop wondering about you. They think they know your limits, your triggers, your motivations. This predictability makes you easy to manipulate, sideline, or underestimate. But when you're strategically mysterious, people's brains fill in the gaps with assumptions that usually work in your favor. They assume you're more competent, more connected, more dangerous than you might actually be. Machiavelli observed this with Lorenzo de' Medici, who ruled Florence through perception management rather than force. Lorenzo rarely spoke in council meetings, but when he did, everyone listened intently because his words were rare and therefore seemed more valuable. Here's the psychological mechanism. Scarcity creates value. When your thoughts, emotions, and reactions are scarce commodities, people assign them higher importance. This doesn't mean becoming antisocial or cold. It means becoming intentional about what you reveal, when you reveal it, and to whom. The most untouchable people Machiavelli studied shared three characteristics. Characteristic 1. They never explained themselves to people who hadn't earned explanations. They understood that over-explanation signals insecurity and gives others ammunition for future manipulation. Characteristic 2. They maintained the same energy regardless of external circumstances. Whether facing criticism, praise, crisis, or success, their external demeanor remained consistent. This consistency became their signature and their shield. Characteristic 3. They made others feel slightly off balance, not through hostility, but through unpredictability. People never knew exactly where they stood, which kept everyone more respectful and cautious. But there's a darker side to this strategy. Because becoming untouchable requires understanding predatory behavior, therefore Machiavelli developed a system for identifying who in your circle poses the greatest threat to your psychological safety. He categorized people into 5 types based on how they respond to strength versus vulnerability. Type 1. The emotional vampire. These people drain your energy by constantly seeking sympathy, validation, or emotional support, while offering nothing substantive in return. They test your boundaries by overwhelming you with their problems. Machiavelli's test: share a minor success with them. If they immediately redirect the conversation to their own struggles or find ways to diminish your achievement, they're an emotional vampire. Type 2. The information harvester. These people ask probing questions about your personal life, plans, or feelings, while sharing nothing meaningful about themselves. They're building a psychological profile to use later. Machiavelli's test: ask them equally personal questions. If they deflect while continuing to probe you, they're harvesting information for strategic purposes. Type 3. The weakness exploiter. These people seem supportive when you're strong, but become subtly hostile or competitive when you show any vulnerability. They unconsciously prey on perceived weakness. Machiavelli's test: mention a small concern or challenge. If they offer advice that makes you feel worse about yourself, or suggest you're not capable of handling it, they exploit weakness. Type 4. The status challenger. These people constantly test your boundaries, question your decisions, or undermine your authority in subtle ways. They're unconsciously competing for social dominance. Machiavelli's test: make a firm decision about something that affects both of you. If they immediately challenge it, or try to negotiate it, rather than accept your leadership, they're status challengers. Type 5. The loyalty tester. These people create artificial conflicts or dilemmas to test where your loyalties lie. They want to know if they can control you through guilt, obligation, or fear of disappointing them. Machiavelli's test: notice if they frequently put you in positions where you must choose between them and other people or priorities. This is strategic manipulation. Once you identify these types in your circle, Machiavelli's response strategy becomes crucial. Because different predator types require different responses, therefore Machiavelli developed specific protocols for maintaining your untouchable status with each type. Protocol 1: Energy preservation for emotional vampires. Never try to fix their problems or provide the emotional support they're seeking. Instead, redirect conversations toward solutions they must implement themselves. Example response: that sounds challenging. What's your plan for handling it? Then change the subject regardless of their answer. Protocol 2: Information control for information harvesters. Answer their questions with questions. Give vague responses to personal inquiries while gathering intelligence about their motivations. Example response: why do you ask? Or, what makes you curious about that? This reverses the dynamic and puts them on the defensive. Protocol 3: Strength projection for weakness exploiters. Never reveal uncertainty, fear, or need for their approval. When they offer helpful advice that feels undermining, thank them and do the opposite. Example response: I appreciate your perspective. I'll handle it my way. Then demonstrate competence through action, not explanation. Protocol 4: Boundary enforcement for status challengers. Don't engage in arguments or justifications. Simply restate your position once, and then act according to your decision, regardless of their objections. Example response: I've made my decision. Let's move forward. Then proceed as planned without further discussion. Protocol 5: Independence demonstration for loyalty testers. Refuse to participate in artificial conflicts.
The one who was once powerless begins to rise. The game that once seemed unbreakable starts to collapse. And the narcissist, who thrived on predictability, finds themselves face to face with a truth they cannot control. This is not the empath becoming cruel. This is not the empath turning into what they once suffered under. This is the empath awakening, embracing their hidden strength and stepping into balance. This is the moment when silence becomes power, when boundaries become unshakable, and when the empath finally discovers the freedom that was within them all along. There comes a moment in the life of every empath when the world no longer feels the same. What once felt like a calling to love, to give, to heal, begins to feel like a burden too heavy to carry. The empath who has spent years offering compassion and understanding to those who cannot return it, eventually arrives at a threshold. It is not sudden, yet when it happens, it feels like an awakening that can never be reversed. This turning point is born out of exhaustion, but it is also born out of truth. The empath begins to realize that constantly giving without balance has left them drained, disoriented, and questioning their own worth. The heart that was once so open begins to sense that something essential has been missing all along. It is not love that is absent, for love still flows abundantly. What is absent is balance, and what is absent is strength. You see, the empath is not weak. The empath is powerful, but that power has been hidden beneath layers of kindness and fear of hurting others. This hidden power waits in the shadows, waiting for the moment when the empath is finally ready to step into it. The turning point comes when the empath can no longer survive in the old patterns of self-sacrifice. It comes when the soul begins to whisper that compassion without boundaries is not compassion at all, but self-betrayal. At this stage, something profound begins to shift inside. The empath recognizes that their greatest gift, the ability to feel deeply, has also been their greatest vulnerability in the hands of those who seek control. The narcissist thrives on this openness. They thrive on the empath's endless willingness to forgive, to understand, to bend. But eventually, the empath sees the pattern clearly. They see that love without limits becomes an invitation for manipulation, and forgiveness without wisdom becomes permission for abuse. This recognition is the beginning of transformation. The turning point is not about becoming cold or unfeeling. It is about reclaiming what was lost in the name of love. It is about standing in the truth that empathy must flow in both directions, that to truly honor others, the empath must also honor themselves. This is not a rejection of compassion. It is compassion elevated to a higher form. It is love that no longer depletes, but instead nourishes both the giver and the receiver. In this awakening, the empath confronts a part of themselves that has been denied for too long. This hidden part is strong, assertive, and unafraid of conflict. It is the part that says no without apology, the part that withdraws when boundaries are crossed.